So welcome to motorcycle hobbies in Canada past August. Balmy -6.5 inside the garage, the almost fully insulated garage, but as you can see, upstairs is the problem. One of these days I'm going to get up there and insulate the ceiling / attic, and hopefully it'll help. The garage door is insulated, which is nice. This man door, as my dad would say, you could throw a cat through some of the cracks, but none of it's impossible. It's just work that needs to be done, and when there's money to spend on other things like motorcycles, sometimes it's hard in the balmy summers to justify going up into an attic and working with fiberglass insulation that if you inhale will kill you. Anyway, just a little update on the bike project. It actually is less put together than it was last week. The great news is once the exhaust got finished at Ironcraft, I took it home. I think we had a day of like 14 or 15 degrees Celsius, ripped home from work, all excited, put some fresh 91 octane in the tank, and it actually fired up and ran and idled better than it did with the original Bimota 2-into-1 system that I had. So, which of course makes sense. The closer you get to a stock or an OEM spec exhaust rather than something you bash together yourself in the garage, the better a bike is going to run. It's still going to need some tuning, but anyway, it ran nicely. Immediate low, realized I needed to shut it off. I checked inside the tank while it was running just to check, see if the fuel pump was burbling away, and there was a skim or a skiff of, can't really see it, paint left over from the previous guy who painted this tank white. I have no idea what the original color was, but obviously there was a whole bunch of overspray that got in. Pour some fuel in there, it starts to be agitated, and it looked like that skim on top of a bowl of soup that started to cool off. So this thing has a fuel filter in it, obviously, but I didn't want that to get gummed up or stuck, or certainly have it run through the throttle body. So I only ran it for maybe a minute and a half. Sounds good, not too loud. I think the rattly dry clutch is actually louder, but turned it off, and then spent last weekend sluicing out the tank. Combination of gasoline, and I was able to take out the pump and reach my hand up through here and kind of scrub the area around where the overspray had gotten from the first paint job that someone else did, with one of those green, call them sponges, but it's not like it's like a, I don't know, equivalent to like a 2000 grit piece of sandpaper. It's for doing dishes, actually. So I was able to get most of it off. Ran a bunch of hot soapy dishwater through it a bunch of times, and then let it dry, because I didn't want to bring it back out here when it's below zero already with any sort of water residue. So my ever-patient wife allowed me to keep a fuel tank in the dining room near the back door on a towel, to allow the water to fully evaporate and disappear. So put the fuel pump back in, and I haven't connected any lines or anything like that. It's being stored for the winter. Obviously, it's not going to run again for months. But that's all good news. It runs. So, and it runs well. So that's a positive thing. The exhaust system itself, I've removed it all because I do have new exhaust gaskets to fit. I do need to buy some new exhaust springs as well, because Ironcraft did fab, this is the wrong orientation, this needs to be turned 180 degrees, but welded on some new spring hooks on there, and I need to get the right length of springs, but those are easy enough to get. 70 and 80 millimeter exhaust springs. I got some that'll work and some that won't, but you know, I'm just buying new ones and keep the old ones for spares. Some of them were stretched a bit too much, but I took the proper measurements, and I'm going to order in the right length. Towards the back here, and this is something, it's almost like a philosophical dilemma. When I started racing over 20 years ago, I had a EX500, you know, grocery getter bike. I had Pirelli 591s on it. Like, I thought there'd never be a stickier tire ever made. and I had fun. I didn't bother with tire warmers. I didn't bother with, a spare set of wheels or any of the other crap that you start to accumulate as you get more serious into your racing. And so at one point, like, I had 2 sets of wheels, tire warmers, generator, and just hauling tons of crap to the track, which, if you're serious about it, you need. But was I having any more fun? I'm not sure I was. So this year, while I was building this, I went out on the Monster that's under the cover there. Had a lot of fun doing track days, but I still want to race. I still want to, build bikes and see how competitive I can make them, because of course I'm smarter than any Italian or German or Japanese motorcycle engineer. So that's the whole origin behind this. But these, so they're axle sliders, obvious. It allows a traditional swing arm stand, but you can't change wheels very easily with these things on there. So I'm not going to bother with extra wheels. I'm just going to get the stickiest road legal tires I can get. Not these. These aren't bad. They're Pilot Power 2CTs, but I'm looking at Bridgestone R22s or Dunlop Q4s or Michelin Pilot Pures, and just come to the track, check tire pressures, put gas in it, and go as fast as I can and try to have some fun. Yeah, do I have to worry about tires warming up? Yeah. Do I have to worry about, changing conditions? Yeah, but, a solid road legal Hypersport tire, although they're not great in the rain because most of them have no sipes past about this point, I've never dragged my knee in the wet anyway. So, yeah, I'm going to try to keep it simple. So, I'll in the spring, I'll make a decision on what kind of tires I'm going to get. I'm not brand loyal. I'm not good enough to tell the difference. They're all black and round and made of rubber, and go from there. Shock has been removed. I think I'd said earlier that the shock itself, it needs to be serviced, and I got to admit I'm a tad worried. It's an Öhlins shock, one of the OEM Öhlins, so still better than any of the Showa or Sachs shocks that were on these things. But the rebound damper adjuster was extremely stiff and almost ceased solid, so it certainly couldn't be adjusted by 2 fingers on the bike. As I said, the shaft was weeping, so it needed to rebuild anyway, and the rebound damping circuit, even backed all the way off, was way too slow. So hopefully, I've sent it to Capital Motorsports in Winnipeg the same day they announced the code red lockdown, so I'm sure it'll get there. Hopefully Dave can rebuild it for me. But I'm hoping there's not something seriously wrong with the shock, like it's just fresh oil and checking the shim stacks and all that sort of stuff, and new seals, and hopefully that'll be enough. But that adjuster being seized like that, if any of you have ever used Öhlins shocks, like even old ones, like the damper adjusters are just beautiful, nice and slick with little indent clicks and that sort of thing. So yeah, he might be able to fix it no problem, or there's some more serious problem with the shock, so we'll have to see. So with this whole idea of running one set of tires combined with my shoulder injury and my wonky wrist, what are these doing on the bike? Well, I think I'm going to run bars and risers on this rather than clip-ons. They will clear the fairing here, but I just found back in 2017 I raced a KTM Duke, certainly a different layout than this bike, more like a motocross bike, but again, like I had tire warmers, I had a spare set of rims with wets, but the upright riding position and the fact that it only made 70 horsepower, like I didn't change tires all year, and I think the first weekend of that year, I won my first race in years simply because it was in dodgy conditions. I went out there on slicks. I had wide bars. If needed, I could, stick my leg out supermoto style with about 10 degrees of lean. But like I won the race going away by 15 or 20 seconds, I think. So I just find that with the riser bars, it certainly is easier to control a bike in dodgy conditions. And yeah, there's a drawback in aerodynamics perhaps when the conditions are dry, but for the last several years, I've raced bikes with riser bars just to deal with my niggling injuries in my old age, and I've enjoyed it. So that's the plan here. So after all the work trying to orientate these clip-ons and not hammering the fairing and everything else, I'm going to put riser bars on anyway. Of course, none of this is simple, because I originally thought that Triumph, because it's a Triumph front end, the triples were interchangeable and the top yokes were interchangeable, and it's simply not the case. So I got my machinist to make the longer stem that'll work for the Ducati frame and put it in the Triumph Daytona bottom yoke, thinking the street triple top yoke will fit, but it will not. It's got a different offset, which makes sense. The street triple is more of a street orientated bike, and I think the it's raked out a bit. So what'll happen is I finally found a 2015 Triumph Street Triple bottom yoke from the States. Not cheap, but I gave the guy a lowball offer and he took it. It's being shipped up. So then when that comes in and when the shock is done, so I can properly secure the bike, the front end is coming off again. And so I'll take it back to the machinist. He'll push out this stem, press it into the street triple bottom yoke, which will work with the street triple top yoke, bolt it all together, put some Renthal or motocross fat bar risers in there as low as possible. I need to trim and modify this so this gauge will fit on there, and I've got higher bars. And again, I'm sure some scientist or Japanese engineer could tell me I'm being stupid, because this frame normally had a steering damper on it, but when I went at it with the angle grinder, I took all the mounting lugs off. Besides, I wasn't using the same forks anyway, so I'd have to come up with another solution. This is total garage shade tree engineering. But if the new forks that come on have a slightly more chopped out rake to them, I'm hoping to not have to bother with the steering damper, and with the riser bars it's not going to be necessary anyway. There's a couple of serious bumps on our local track, but again, this isn't a 170 horsepower Gixxer 1000, it's a 70 horsepower Ducati, so the issue around a steering damper maybe isn't that critical. So when I take the whole front end off, take it back to the machinist to press out the stem, he's probably going to look at me like I've got three heads, but whatever. I pay cash, he appreciates it. At the same time, he'll machine some more spacers for me and that sort of thing that I need to get done. It'll allow me to take the forks out. Brake calipers have been rebuilt with new pads, but the forks, as far as I know, the fork oil is from 2015 when these were built back in the factory in England, or you know, Japan, or even before that. Who knows? These forks could have been put together in 2012 and then shipped to Triumph and put on a bike when it went off the assembly line at that time. So anyway, I've got the damping screws all backed all the way out, and I'll take the opportunity to rebuild the forks, and it's not leaking, but while I'm at it, new seals, new dust seals, fresh oil, you know, check the, anywhere you go on the forum, everyone's got a different idea of fork oil height or volume, but I'll pick one that makes sense to me and put them all back together. And you know, then I'll have to likely make some adjustments or orientation of the brake line. I think I can get away with the stock throttle cable that I've got on there by twisting this around, say 70 degrees. And I've got tons of room, as you can see, with the clutch line if the bars suddenly go up a bit. So yeah, the whole idea is to, I guess, come up with maybe a less aggressive rider position in the idea that, you know, should the rain come or we have dodgy conditions, that'll help me control the bike better, which it certainly did with the KTM. Like I said, I raced a whole season having, you know, a set of wets on wheels that I never took off the trailer because I didn't need it. I wasn't backing it in like Chris Fillmore into every corner, but the four or five times it did rain or we were in, I guess, intermediate conditions, I just fired up that KTM and off I went on full slicks and had no problem. So I'm hoping with a Hyper Sport, DOT legal street tire, and a slightly upright riding position, should it rain or should the weather turn to crap, I can still go out there and not worry about my riding position, or having the clip-ons below the triples or whatever. Which, in theory I hope will work, but I'm sure someone smarter out there is going to tell me I'm being a fool, but it's my idea, my money, my bike, we'll see. So this will likely be the last update for a while, I think. But then again, you never know. I might, I'm busy with work. I can only really work on weekends. -6 is balmy. In a month and a half's time, it's going to be -16 or -26 in here. So what I can do out here is very limited too. You don't touch wiring looms. You avoid mucking with anything with rubber, because at that temperature things just break. So when I do get the street triple stem in, I'll take it to the machinist, and all of this stuff at the front end I can gingerly take apart and not damage anything. I've been working outside in the winter for years, and I know what I can and can't do when it's -30 ambient temperature outside. So those of you in Toronto or Vancouver or Kuala Lumpur or even in the UK, us Canadians are pretty hardy when it comes to working on bikes in the off season. We have about a 5-month riding season, so this is what we do when we can't ride. We don't hunt moose, and some of us don't like snowmobiles, so that's what we do.